because then foreigners will have more of your currency. And if they have more of your currency and you don't screw up your currency, then they will treat it as a reserve asset. That's how you rival the dollar. Problem. If you're doing lots of imports, what's going to happen? In order to do those imports, you're going to have to increase domestic consumption. In order to increase domestic consumption, your wages have to go up. If your wages go up, what happens to the price of your exports? They go up. So you kill your exports. Well, yes, you want to become more consumption oriented. Yeah, but unfortunately, in the present moment, the exports are a large part of what pays the bills.
So China doesn't necessarily
switch. It's not a question. No, but it's like it's just like the dollarization problem, right? In theory, it would be good if everyone held dollars. But given the fact that 60% have them and don't want to give them 40% that doesn't, the only way out of that is if you earn a shit more dollars. Nobody knows how Argentina overnight or over the next 10 years is going to earn a magic amount of dollars, right? So there's your hard problem. If you're an export-driven economy, becoming a consumption economy means consuming more. That means exporting less. If exports are paying your bills, you've got a problem doing that.
Okay, so does China actually want to transition to a more import-oriented country? Or
well, that's the thing. It did until recently. I mean, the recent noises out of the Treasury and the central bank reformation that's just happened under Xi suggests not. It suggests really that they're just doubling down on the exports. Right now, I mean, this is why the European car industry should be panking itself at this point in time. They have enough capacity to sell everybody in the world an electric car. Everybody.
How can these things actually be predicted? I mean, you just said Ray Dalio might not be the best futurist in that topic.
He's just telling us something that we've known for 60 years. I mean, come on, really?
But it's a vastly different idea of the future than yours, right? He says world currency in the future, China. You don't necessarily say that.
Yeah, no, I think it's wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Americans can screw it up, right? I mean, if we elect a president who has no respect for rule of law, that uses the judiciary to go after his enemies, and essentially turns us into a version of Turkey meets Hungary, then at that point in time, international investors might not trust the sanctity of the dollar. If we decide to seize Russian assets that are denominated in dollars and give them to Ukraine, then lots of other countries around the world might say, why am I holding dollar assets? Because if you guys can do that to them, you can do it to me. There's lots of ways you can lose your monetary supremacy. I'm not saying it's carved in stone, but it's really hard to do that if you're doubling down on exports. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Do you see any other country other than China then taking the spot?
Well, the Europeans had in its initial formation, right, in the Delors Commission and other places, there was a desire amongst that generation to use the euro to challenge the dollar. But that also kind of falls down on this fundamental problem. The European growth model, such as it is essentially one whereby the North is a bunch of exporters who like to have an undervalued exchange rate and suppress consumption, have balanced budgets and all that good stuff. Spar and Dan Kalfen, right? All this nonsense. And that benefits them because it generates a lot of exports, and those exports go to those firms, and it's horrible for domestic inequality, actually, and it makes some people very rich, but it doesn't benefit most workers. But put that to one side. Then you got the South. The South is consumption-based, but is now in a regime, because of the euro, where it can't print money. It can't spend a lot of money. So it's running permanent deficits that complement the surpluses generated in the North. When you're doing all that, you're not putting a lot of euros out there in the world. Right? You're just not. What you're doing is you're sucking in other stuff because you're predominantly an export platform, and the bits that don't do exports are basically supporting the consumption in the Eurozone. So there's just not enough euros out there. Look at the share of euros as global reserves. It used to be around 30%. I think it's fallen to below 20%. And as for China as global reserves, I don't think it's hit. I haven't looked at this for a long time. It's between 2% and 10%, and I can't tell you where. So the dollar's still 70% of everything. Now, the reason for this, again, most people don't know this. I'll tell you something else you probably don't know. You know that more dollars are issued outside the United States than inside the United States?
No, I didn't.
Right. It's a thing called the euro markets. So here's a fascinating little story. In 1958, the Brits were trying to reassert their dominance as a financial center. And the Americans were basically, New York was beginning to sort of wake up from its long New Deal slumber. And the Brits were like, how do we make some money? And the Russians came to them and said, we need help. And they're like, what do you need help with? Because the Cold War, remember? I said, well, look, we've got all these dollars that we've earned. We earned them from mineral exports and wheat exports, all that sort of stuff. And it's not that we're selling to the US, it's the fact that everybody else uses dollars. Like, but if we go to Citibank and open up an account, hi, we're the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, can we have a bank account? They'll be like, no, and we're screwed. So can you help us? And they said, yeah, sure. What we'll do is we'll turn this little office in Threadneedle Street into what we call an offshore zone. And because it's offshore, neither the laws of the United States nor the laws of the United Kingdom actually apply to it. So you can dump all your dollars here. We'll bring lots of other people together to borrow your dollars, and we'll basically turn that into a kind of like big fund external to the United States. So suddenly, every company in the world that's earning dollars, it's a US company that doesn't want to pay taxes, starts dumping its money in here. And then Italian regional governments that don't want to deal with Rome, they want to build some bridges, they go get a euro loan from the euro markets in dollars. And all this builds up from the 70s into the 80s into the 90s and is now an integral chunk of global finance. And what it means is every year more dollar loans are written outside the United States than they are produced by the Federal Reserve.
Wow.
So
it becomes
if
a
that's the
flywheel.
case, so everybody's embedded in it.